Hello, and welcome to the Commission on State Mandates Navigating the Mandates Process workshop. I added a link to the PDF of this presentation in the chat. It is also available on the Commission's website. Navigate to www.csm.ca.gov. Then click the New Education tab at the top of the page at the end of the ribbon on the right. Then click the link for today's workshop, and then click the link Training Materials. Please note that the links in the PDF of this presentation are live, so please feel free to open and review any of the linked documents as we go along, and we can return to discuss any of them in more depth during the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Please add your questions to the chat, and we will discuss them together at the end of the presentation. We will respond to any raised hand requests following the presentation and completion of our discussion of the questions in the chat. Please type all your questions in the chat. We will begin with a general introduction to the state mandates process and take a tour of the Commission's website. Next, we will answer 4 of the most frequently asked questions. Was a test claim already filed on a statute or executive order? How do I file comments on a pending matter? And what are the evidence, certification, filing, and service requirements? How do I join a mailing list? What is being heard on the next agenda? Let's proceed with a general introduction to the state mandates process and tour the website. The Commission on State Mandates provides on its website a guide to the mandate determination process, a telephone number, and a general inquiries email address to contact Commission staff for assistance with questions between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. on weekdays. On the homepage of the Commission's website, there are several sets of links. The first set is in the ribbon across the top of the page. If you scroll down, there is a green box in the center towards the bottom of the page that includes a link to join the Commission's self-serve mailing lists, as well as the Commission's contact information at the bottom of the page. In the center of the page, over the image of the Capitol, you'll see 3 black rectangles. In the black rectangle on the left, we include quick links, which are listed both under the quick links icon here and again at the bottom of the page. In the black rectangle in the center, we include a link to the Commission's Dropbox, which is used for all e-filings. A link to the Dropbox also appears in the ribbon at the top of the page. In the black rectangle on the right, we include a link to the mandates guide that we will review together. The guide provides an overview of the process that claimants, the Commission, affected state and local agencies, parties, and interested parties, and interested persons follow when local agencies and school districts seek reimbursement by filing a test claim with the Commission. The first 4 sections of the guide describe the test claim process. In enacting a statute or imposing an executive order, the legislature, governor, or a state agency may impose a new program or higher level of service on local agencies or school districts. If the statute or executive order does not contain sufficient funding and there are increased costs as a result of the change, affected local agencies and school districts may seek reimbursement by filing a test claim with the Commission on State Mandates. Test claim means the first claim filed with the Commission alleging that a particular statute or executive order imposes costs mandated by the state and functions like a class action. The claim must be filed within 12 months of the effective date of the law or of the claimant first incurring costs. The claim is required to include the identification of specific sections of the statute or executive order alleged to contain the mandate, provide a detailed description of the activities and costs alleged to be mandated, and otherwise comply with the filing requirements of Government Code Section 17553 and the Commission's regulations. The Commission hears and makes a determination on each claim. The first section of the flowchart on the right side of page 3 of the guide describes the initial filing and issue of the test claim, followed by the 30-day comment period, which is followed by the rebuttal period, 30 days from the service date of the comments. The second section describes the issue of the draft proposed decision, followed by its 3-week comment period. The issue of the draft proposed decision at least 8 weeks before the hearing officially sets that matter for hearing. There is no rebuttal period for comments filed on a draft proposed decision. All comments are filed concurrently. The third and fourth sections of the flowchart describe the issue of the proposed decision, which occurs approximately 2 weeks prior to the hearing. There is no comment period for the proposed decision, which is followed by the Commission hearing to approve, partially approve, or deny the test claim. For test claims that are denied, this is the end of the Commission on State Mandates process. See the key explanations listed near the top of the decisions page of the Commission's website for more details. The following 3 sections of the flowchart on page 3 of the guide describe the process for adopting parameters and guidelines if the test claim is approved. For approved test claims, the Commission must determine the amount to be reimbursed. Either the test claimant develops proposed parameters and guidelines, or Commission staff prepares draft expedited parameters and guidelines that identify the mandated program, eligible claimants, period of reimbursement, reimbursable activities, and other necessary claiming information. The Commission hears and may adopt, amend, or reject the proposed parameters and guidelines. The 5th and 6th sections of the flowchart describe the issue of draft expedited parameters and guidelines, followed by its 21-day comment period, which is followed by the rebuttal period 15 days from the service date of the comments. The next section indicates the Commission hearing to adopt the decision and parameters and guidelines which, among other things, specifies the reimbursable activities. The last 4 sections of the flowchart on page 3 of the guide describe the process for the state controller. Once the parameters and guidelines are approved, 90 days later, the controller issues the claiming instructions for the new program. Then, eligible claimants can file reimbursement claims with the controller. The claiming data is then provided to the Commission, and a statewide cost estimate for eligible costs is adopted by the Commission and reported to the legislature, which forms the basis of state budget appropriations to fund the costs of the mandated program. Now let's return to our tour of the website. The Commission's File a Claim webpage provides links to the request form for test claim and incorrect reduction claim and the mandate redetermination form. The Commission's Form Request webpage provides the request form for the official Adobe Sign forms for test claims and incorrect reduction claims, which must be used to file each type of claim. There are links to reference forms and links to the sections of the Commission's regulations that govern each process. The Commission's Form Request webpage also provides a PDF copy of a sample test claim form that includes links to the California Constitution, Government Code, and Commission regulations that can be downloaded directly from the page. The Commission's Form Request webpage also includes the test claim worksheet that was developed specifically as a tool to assist local agencies and school districts in identifying and organizing the information necessary to file a test claim. The Commission's Form Request webpage for incorrect reduction claims provides a PDF copy of a sample incorrect reduction claim form that also includes links to the California Constitution, Government Code, and Commission regulations that can be downloaded directly from the page. The For Comment webpage provides a list of new matters issued for comment near the top of the page. The For Comment webpage also includes upcoming hearing agenda items issued for comment near the bottom of the page. The Pending Caseload webpage includes the caseload schedule for all pending matters and their tentative hearing dates according to the phase of the matter and provides links to all pending matter pages. All hearing dates listed in the pending caseload are tentative hearing dates and, as noted earlier, a matter is not officially set for hearing until its draft proposed decision issues. The pending caseload is updated following each hearing. The Decisions webpage provides links to all active mandated programs, Commission decisions since 2010, as well as a search button that may be used to search for specific legislation or program names identified in current or prior claims. The Reports webpage provides links to the Commission's reports to the legislature and to the Director of Finance that describe the Commission's activities more broadly. The biannual Approved Mandates Report is available back to 2002. The annual Denied Mandates Report is available back to 2004. The annual Incorrect Reduction Claims Report is available back to 2010. And the Annual Report to Finance is available back to 2006. The homepage also includes links to the Commission's regulations in the Quick Links section. Finally, the homepage also includes links to the Commission's most recent rulemaking. The question I receive most often is regarding whether or not a test claim was already filed on a particular statute or executive order. Let's discuss a mandate determination process example. Here's one that might be familiar. Statutes 2018, Chapter 120, AB 216, Gonzalez-Fletcher, vote by mail ballots, identification envelopes, prepaid postage. Existing law provides for the procedures by which a voter may apply for and receive a vote by mail ballot. I've removed the additional text of the bill description so that we can focus on the phrase that most callers want to discuss. This bill would provide that If the Commission on State Mandates determines that the bill contains costs mandated by the state, reimbursement for those costs shall be made pursuant to the statutory provisions noted above. This phrasing appears in many bills, but in order for the Commission on State Mandates to make a determination that a bill contains costs mandated by the state, first, a test claim must be filed, and reimbursement for those costs cannot be made unless 1. The test claim is approved. 2. The decision and parameters and guidelines are adopted. 3. The controller issues claiming instructions. And 4. Reimbursement claims are filed with the controller. To find out whether a test claim has already been determined by the Commission on a particular piece of legislation, navigate to the Commission's homepage at www.csm.ca.gov. Then click on Decisions in the top ribbon. Then locate and click on the orange Search Decisions button. Then type in the House AB or SB and the bill number or executive order number. Then click Search. In this example, we entered AB 216 in the search box. Then review the results. The first two items listed include Statutes 2018, Chapter 120, AB 216, which was the subject statute of the test claim, vote by mail ballots, prepaid postage, 19 TC 01. Then search for this matter on the Decisions page using Control F for Find. Type in the matter number 19-TC-01 for this example. Then click the hyperlink to the matter to review the matter. Some of the older programs do not include a hyperlink, and only the decisions for the test claim and, if it was approved, for the parameters and guidelines and statewide cost estimate are posted on the Decisions page of the website. If there are no parameters and guidelines or statewide cost estimate, see the key explanations at the top of the Decisions page for more details. Most often, they're missing because the test claim was denied by the Commission. To review existing state-mandated cost program information, navigate to the State Controller's website at www.sco.ca.gov. Then click on State and Local. Then click on Local Government. Then click on State Mandated Programs. For this example, on the left side of the page, click Local Agencies Fiscal Year 2022-2023, then scroll down to Vote by Mail Ballots, Prepaid Postage, Program number 377, to review the claiming instructions. On the same pages as the claiming instructions are located, if you scroll up to the top of the page, above the claiming instructions, you will find more information regarding the current appropriations, the list of suspended mandates, and programs set aside and canceled by the Commission on State Mandates because they were eliminated, repealed, and consolidated programs that have ended. On the main State Mandates Programs page, you will also find the contact information for the local reimbursement section of the Controller's Office and the current state mandated program assignments for staff, links for joining the Controller's mailing lists, as well as links to audits and resource links and websites. Let's move on to another popular question. How do I file comments on a pending matter? And what are the evidence, certification, filing, and service requirements? As we noted earlier, On the home page, in the ribbon across the top of the page, and in the center black rectangle over the image of the Capitol, is a link to the Commission's Dropbox, used for e-filing all documents with the Commission. On the Dropbox page, there's also a link to the instructions for using the Dropbox. If you have any questions or trouble using the Commission's Dropbox, please contact Commission staff. Let's review the regulations that govern the filing of comments on a test claim. You will notice the regulations often cite to the same other two Commission regulations, hyperlinked here and throughout the presentation. Section 1181.3, Certification, Formatting, Filing, and Service of Written Materials and New Filings, as well as Section 1187.5, Evidence Submitted to the Commission. It is a good idea to review both of these regulations prior to preparing and filing written comments with the Commission. Let's begin with Commission Regulation Section 1183.2, Filing of Comments on the Test Claim. Written comments concerning the test claim shall be certified, filed, and served within 30 days from the date the test claim or amendment is issued for comment, and in accordance with Section 1181.3 of these regulations. Content and form. Written comments on the test claim shall contain the following documentary evidence if applicable. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with Section 1187.5 of these regulations. A copy of relevant portions of state constitutional provisions, federal statutes, and executive orders, and a copy of administrative decisions and court decisions that may impact the alleged mandate unless the authorities are also cited in the test claim. The specific statutes and chapters, articles, sections, regulatory registers, and page numbers shall be identified. Published court decisions arising from state mandate determinations by the Board of Control and the Commission on State Mandates, Article 13B, Section 6 of the California Constitution, and Government Code Sections 17500 et sec are exempt from the requirements of this subdivision. You will notice similar regulatory language appears for other types of comments. Let's move on to Commission Regulation Section 1183.3, Claimant's Rebuttal. Written rebuttals to written comments concerning a test claim may be filed and shall be certified, filed, and served in accordance with Section 1181.3 of these regulations within 30 days of service of the written comments. Content and form. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with Section 1187.5 of these regulations. Include a copy of relevant portions of state constitutional provisions, federal statutes, and executive orders, and a copy of administrative decisions and court decisions that are cited in the rebuttal, unless the authorities are also cited in the test claim or any opposition thereto. Published court decisions arising from state mandate determinations by the Board of Control and the Commission on State Mandates, Article 13B, Section 6 of the California Constitution, and Government Code Sections 17500 et sec are exempt from the requirement to include a copy. The specific statutes and chapters, articles, sections, regulatory registers, and page numbers of the authorities shall be identified in the written rebuttal. Let's move on to Commission Regulation Section 1183.6, Filing of Comments on the Draft Proposed Decision. At least 8 weeks before the hearing or at a time required by the executive director or stipulated to by the parties, commission staff shall prepare a draft proposed decision and distribute it to the parties, interested parties, and those on the mailing list described in section 1181.4 of these regulations, and shall post it on the commission's website. Anyone may file written comments concerning the draft proposed decision. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with section 1187.5 of these regulations. Written comments shall be certified, filed, and served in accordance with section 1181.3 of these regulations by the date determined and noticed by the executive director. A 3-week period for comments shall be given, subject to the executive director's authority to expedite all matters pursuant to Government Code Section 17530. All written comments timely filed shall be reviewed by commission staff and may be incorporated into the proposed decision for the test claim. Note that there is no rebuttal period for comments filed on a draft proposed decision. All comments on draft proposed decisions are filed concurrently. It is the Commission's policy to discourage the introduction of late comments, exhibits, or other evidence filed after the 3-week comment period described in subdivision C of this section. The Commission need not rely on, and staff need not respond to, late comments, exhibits, or other evidence filed in response to a draft proposed decision after the comment period expires. Let's move on to Commission Regulations Section 1183.9, filing of comments on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines. Parties, and interested persons may file comments on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines within 21 days of service of Commission staff's draft proposal. Such comments shall be certified, filed, and served in accordance with section 1181.3 of these regulations. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with section 1187.5 of these regulations. Within 15 days of service of the comments filed pursuant to subdivision B of this section, parties, and interested persons may file and serve rebuttals. Such rebuttals shall be certified, filed, and served in accordance with section 1181.3 of these regulations. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with section 1187.5 of these regulations. Note that the rebuttal period for comments on the test claim is 30 days from service of the comments, where the rebuttal period for comments on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines is different and shorter, 15 days from service of the comments. If no comments are filed on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines that raise substantive issues regarding any of the elements described in section 1183.7, a draft proposed decision in accordance with section 1183.13a of these regulations need not be prepared, and the executive director may schedule the proposed decision and parameters and guidelines for adoption at the next regularly scheduled hearing in accordance with section 1183.13d of these regulations. This expedited process allows the Commission, in the event that there are no substantive comments filed on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines, to move forward to the hearing on the proposed decision and parameters and guidelines sometimes as soon as the hearing following the test claim adoption, significantly reducing the delay between the adoption of the decision, partially approving or approving a test claim, and the availability of claiming instructions for claimants so that they can file their reimbursement claims with the controller. Let's move on to Commission Regulations, Section 1183.13, filing of comments on the draft proposed decision and parameters and guidelines. In the event that substantive comments are filed on the draft expedited parameters and guidelines, a draft proposed decision and parameters and guidelines is issued. Written comments on the draft proposed decision and parameters and guidelines shall be certified, filed, and served in accordance with Section 1181.3 of these regulations by the date noticed by the Executive Director. A 3-week period for comments shall be given, subject to the Executive Director's authority to expedite all matters pursuant to Government Code Section 17530. If representations of fact are made, they shall be supported by documentary or testimonial evidence in accordance with Section 1187.5 of these regulations. All written comments timely filed shall be reviewed by Commission staff and may be incorporated into the proposed decision and parameters and guidelines. Note that there is no rebuttal period for comments filed on a draft proposed decision and parameters and guidelines. All comments on draft proposed decisions and parameters and guidelines are filed concurrently. Let's move to another question we frequently receive. How do I join a mailing list? Self-serve email lists, agenda, rulemaking, and mandates chronicles. Navigate to the Commission's homepage at www.csm.ca.gov. Then scroll down near the bottom of the page in the center and click on the green button, Join Our Mailing Lists. Use this page to subscribe to the Commission's 3 self-service email lists: Agenda, Rulemaking, and Mandates Chronicles. To join a particular matter or set of matters mailing lists, please contact Commission staff. If you would like to be on the mailing list for all of the matters filed by a particular type of claimant or all claimants, this is also possible. Please contact Commission staff. Let's move on to our last frequently asked question for this presentation. What is being heard on the next agenda? The hearings webpage includes links to current and prior hearing agendas, and items for each agenda are posted approximately 2 weeks prior to the hearing. Once adopted by the Commission, hearing minutes and transcripts are posted here. If you would like to join the agenda mailing list or any of the Commission's 3 self-serve mailing lists, Agenda, Rulemaking, and Mandates Chronicles, there is another Join Mailing List orange button on the right side of the hearings page under the list of upcoming meeting dates. Okay, hopefully everybody's entering their questions into the chat, and I'll give everybody a few minutes to go ahead and do that. And also remind everyone of our telephone number, 916-323-3562, and our general inquiries email address, csminfo@csm.ca.gov. This concludes the Navigating the Mandates Process workshop. Let's move now to the questions in the chat. Hi, everybody. Okay. Let's see. Looks like we had a question about the link to the presentation. Thank you so much. It is posted on the commission's homepage, and it's also posted in the chat up at the top of the screen. Oh, great. Looks like you got it. Thank you. Okay. As unfunded state mandate legislation is enacted every year, will this presentation discuss when we can or should submit a claim? That is a fantastic question. And the best place to look for that would be to take a look at the guide that's posted on the commission's website, because it does describe the requirements. So I'll share the website. And I read through this also, but if you click on the black rectangle on the right-hand side of the Capitol, that's going to open the mandates guide that I was going over. Let's make sure that everybody can see that. This is the one with the blue and the green triangles on the front of it. So if you scroll to page 3 and scroll down in the area that's discussing the test claim, make that a little bigger. So the test claim means the first claim, right? Filed with the commission. Let's see. Okay, so right in the second sentence of that paragraph, the claim must be filed within 12 months of the effective date of the statute or of the date of first incurring costs. The claim is required to include the identification of the sections of the statute. We can also go over the regulations that pertain specifically to the jurisdictional window within which a test claim can be filed. So if you're on the home screen, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can click on regulations and you can go through the steps to go through and get to all of the commission's regulations. Or you can scroll up to the top of the page and click on file a claim, and then click on test claim. And on the right-hand side of the page, we include a link to section 1183.1. And I'll just put a link to this section in the chat, if everybody, make it easier for everybody to click on that same regulation link. The first part of this regulation identifies who is eligible to file a test claim. So if it's a county, it has to be the county auditor, the auditor controller, the director of finance, etc. For cities, school districts, community college districts, or special districts. And then it provides the instructions if you'd like to file a joint claim. But if you keep scrolling down to this paragraph below B3, otherwise, the first claim filed on a statute or executive order by a similarly situated claimant is the test claims, and no other claim will be accepted by the commission. So this is describing the same information that's in the guide. And in C, except as provided in Government Code sections 17573 and 17574, any test claim or amendment filed with the commission must be filed within 12 months, 365 days following the effective date of a statute or executive order, or within 12 months, 365 days of first incurring costs, whichever is later. So if we return to the form request page and we click on the right-hand side of the page under reference PDF forms, we have a link that I mentioned in the presentation to the test claim form. So this is just a PDF of the form. Let me make sure that I'm sharing that page. make it a little smaller. And if you take a look at page 2 in section 4 of the test claim form, first you identify the pleading, whichever statute, whichever bill number, whichever regulations, etc., is described in this box. But immediately below that box, you have a series of choices. So the first checkbox indicates that the test claim is timely filed, and then you would insert the date. So let's say you were filing a test claim today and it was 10/17/2024. You have two choices for each of the statutes or regulatory sections that are pled. A, it is either not later than 12 months following the effective date. So you would enter the effective date of the statute here. So if we were filing a test claim today based on a statute that became effective January 1, 2024, we would enter January 1, 2024 in this box. It could also be the case, as it often is, especially when statutes are particularly complicated or they roll out over a period of time, that perhaps the date of first incurred costs is later than 12 months. So it could be the case that you're filing on a test claim on a statute that became effective last year, say January 1, 2023, but you didn't start to incur any costs until January 1, 2024. So then you would enter the date of first incurred costs here. Keep in mind that it's entirely possible to file a test claim on several different statutes. Maybe one of them became effective within 365 days, in which case you would check the checkbox for A. It could be that another one of them became effective before that, but you didn't start to incur costs until later. So you could absolutely have a test claim where both A and B are checked when you're filing based on multiple statutes. Okay, let's look at the next question. Is reimbursement available for the costs of implementing a mandatory program in addition to the costs of actually running the mandatory program? So I think the question that we're asking is regarding the parameters and guidelines. So let's go back to the home page. Let's make sure I'm sharing the right page. And we can take a look. Let's see a good example of some parameters and guidelines that are in process. So if we go to the pending caseload page, we can scroll down past the pending test claims and past the pending parameters and guidelines to the statewide cost estimate section. So since the test claim is the first phase, the parameters and guidelines is the second phase, you know that a matter is listed in the statewide cost estimate section, that those parameters and guidelines have already been adopted. So if we click on the first one, for example, we'll see the decision that was adopted in July of 2024. And then we'll also see the decision and parameters and guidelines that were adopted in September. If you click the links for any of these examples and take a look at the decision, generally scroll down to the end, to the conclusion, and it will list which of the activities or statutes that were pled and which of the activities or statutes that were approved. You'll find that there's more things often listed for the test claim decision than are listed in the decision and parameters and guidelines, because not everything pled ultimately is approved or partially approved. That's what a partial approved generally means. So if you take a look at the parameters and guidelines, that's going to include all of the reimbursable activities. And then for our example, we're looking at the controller's webpage. If we go to the controller's website and we click on, as was indicated in the PDF, you want to click on state and local, and then you want to click on local government, and then you want to scroll down and click on state mandated programs. If you scroll down and click local agencies for this example that we already looked at, fiscal year 2023, 2024. And then we can scroll down to vote by mail ballots. These are the claiming instructions. And the claiming instructions include a link to the commission's parameters and guidelines. So for a program that's already been it's already even maybe the statewide cost estimate, like this example, the statewide cost estimate has already been adopted. You can always just go to the controller's website, find the claiming instructions, and then you can find a link that will take you back to the commission's parameters and guidelines. It's the controller who provides the deadlines by which claims need to be filed. That's not included in the commission's determination. Okay, let's see. Are local governments required to perform mandated activities for mandates that CSM determines are reimbursable, but for which the state does not provide appropriations? Actually, that is a fantastic question. That is a little bit more complicated for this presentation, which is really a beginning presentation. Let's take that particular question offline. We can discuss that following the hearing, Taylor. Okay, the next question. If an agency disputes an audit finding, what recourse do they have to dispute it? That's a fantastic question. So let's go back. Let me make sure I am sharing the commission's homepage. So if you go to the commission's homepage again and click on File a Claim, in the event that there's any dispute regarding what the state controller did or didn't reduce the amount of a reimbursement claim, and click on Incorrect Reduction Claim. On this page, if you click on section 1185.1, that's the regulation that governs the incorrect reduction claim process. And let me just verify that I'm sharing the right screen. Yes. So if you scroll down, this is similar to the test claim regulations. To obtain a determination that the Office of the State Controller incorrectly reduced a reimbursement claim, a claimant shall file an incorrect reduction claim with the commission as follows. So the similar set of people are eligible to be the signer on an incorrect reduction claim. And it's also possible, similarly to a test claim, that a claimant could pursue an IRC on behalf of a class of claimants that is detailed in the IRC form itself. And the jurisdictional window is in C. All incorrect reduction claims and amendments thereto shall be filed with the commission no later than 3 years following the date a claimant first receives from the Office of State Controller a final state audit report, letter, or other written notice of adjustment to a reimbursement claim which complies with Government Code Section 17558.5C by specifying the claim components adjusted, the amounts adjusted, interest charges on claims adjusted to reduce the overall reimbursement to the claimant, and the reason for the adjustment. The filing shall be returned to the claimant for lack of jurisdiction if this requirement is not met. Okay, so if we go back to the commission's homepage and click on File a Claim, we also have posted the incorrect reduction claim form. And let me just verify that I am sharing the right screen. And so if you're interested in filing an incorrect reduction claim, you can download the PDF and take a look at the information that's required in order to file an IRC before you fill out the request form to request the official Adobe sign form. But it explains, similarly to the test claim form, the title, the claimant, the claimant representative, the identification of the statutes or executive orders that were pled in the test claim, generally that are listed on the parameters and guidelines. It needs to be timely filed, as was indicated in the regulation, within 3 years. You specify the amounts of the incorrect reduction, and then you include, similarly to a test claim, a written detailed narrative, documentary evidence and declarations, the claiming instructions, as we looked at on the controller's website, a copy of the audit, which is also posted on the website, and then copies of the actual reimbursement claims that were filed with the controller. The form also provides more instructions if you'd like to file a consolidated claim. But if we go back to the controller's website, and let me just verify that I'm sharing the right screen, and go back to the main page, all the audit reports are posted. So if you're looking for local agencies and you wanted to see maybe other audits for other local agencies or school districts, this particular link is all for local agencies. You can take a look at other audits. And then also on the commission's decisions page, at this moment, if you look on pending caseload and scroll down, you're going to find that we don't have at this moment any incorrect reduction claims pending. So currently we have none. But if you'd like to look at previous decisions, specifically previous decisions of incorrect reduction claims filed on the similar program, if you click the link at the top of the page for incorrect reduction claims, that's going to take you to the bottom part of the decisions page where all of the programs and claimants and the numbers of the IRCs are listed. So if you had I'm trying to think of one that was recent. I think the most recent one we did was CASP. Yeah, California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. So if you click the link to the matter, you can take a look at everything. So the actual IRC that was filed, if you're looking for an example, a general idea of how long it took. This particular one didn't have any requests for extension or postponement, so it looks like it proceeded quite quickly. But if you have any particular questions about filing an incorrect reduction claim, my suggestion is to call the commission so that we can help walk you through. Let's see, if a bill does not specify an effective date, how is an effective date determined? That is a great question, and that is legal analysis. If you would like to, we can talk about that, Mr. Lemus, we could talk about that offline. But in general, we can go, let's see, let's go to the example that we looked at. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right page. For vote by mail ballots. So if we go to the decisions page, and then we go to the search button, and we were looking for AB 216. Let's see. And we can take a look at the, let's see, that's going to be a little too complicated to show on the screen. Yeah, that's a little bit too complicated. I guess this one doesn't really give the answer that you're looking for. However, we can just go directly to Ledge Info, which I highly recommend everyone have a link to Ledge Info on their desktop so that you can go to find out about bills. You click on bill information, and it was 216, I think, AB 216, and I believe it was 2020, might have been, and click search. Was that it? Nope. You can go back another, see if that was it. Nope. See, maybe it was 217. Vote by mail ballots. Okay. Okay. So when you're looking at the top of it, it's telling you when it was approved by the governor and when it was filed with the Secretary of State. So in general, with the decision, and this would be better to look at actually on the decision for the test claim. And let's make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Yes. Okay. And pretty much all the decisions have the same format. The first section talks about the summary of findings, and then it gets to the chronology. So in this particular case, the effective date of statutes 2018, chapter 120, amending election code section 3010 was effective on January 1, 2019. So if you have questions about any particular bill and would like to find out questions about when it becomes effective, you can always call the office and then we can see if we can answer that question. Okay, the next question. Do we have to file a test claim for the commission to determine whether the new statute contains costs mandated by the state? I'm referring to this language at the end of a bill. If the Commission on State Mandates determines that this act contains costs mandated by the state, reimbursement to local agencies and school districts for these costs shall be made pursuant to Part 7, commencing with Section 17500 of Division 4 of Title II of the Government Code. And the answer is yes, a test claim must be filed. Okay, what if our county doesn't have enough money to implement a state mandate? Are we required to borrow money and implement the program anyway? If parameters and guidelines are ultimately approved, would our borrowing costs be reimbursable? That is a great question and is much too specific for this general overview discussion. We can take that question offline. Let's see, Taylor is coming offline with the question, and Supervisor Manu. Koenig. Okay. So I want to put my email address into the chat. So for Taylor Kayada and Manu Koenig, those are questions we're going to take offline. So I'll just type my email address. If you'd like to, let's see, I want that to go to everyone. So here's my email address for everyone. The general email for the commission is csminfo@csm.ca.gov. You can also send questions to that email. And it looks like that's a conclusion of the questions in the chat. So, Husham, did you want to unmute folks? Let's see. Terry is raising his hand. Hi, Terry. I can't hear you. You're muted. Are you still there? You're still muted, Terry. That's okay. You're still muted. Did you want to type your question? Oh, you didn't know your hand was raised. Okay, thanks. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to discuss? Oh, Christina Vasquez to everyone. How do we get the answers to the questions being taken offline? Questions need to be taken offline that require more detailed analysis. So those would be for the folks who are asking them. If you would like the answer to a question, please send an email to me and we can organize a time to discuss it, because pretty much everyone has a different set of issues really for any kind of question. So anything other than just the general overview for the Commission on State Mandates is really outside the scope of this presentation. Hopefully soon we'll have classes for how to file a test claim or how to file an incorrect reduction claim on Zoom as well. And those really are a setting that's a little bit more specific to issues surrounding a test claim filing and issues surrounding IRC filing. I highly recommend that everybody join the Mandates Chronicles list. So let me just verify that I'm sharing the right screen so that we can look at the website. If you go to the Commission's website and click on the Education tab at the far right of the ribbon, let's see, this is where additional, I'm having challenges with sharing. This is where additional classes will be posted. And you can click the join mailing list orange button here on this page. The same button is also available on the Commission's homepage, join our mailing lists. So I encourage everyone to sign up to the Mandates Chronicles list. This is where we'll be sending notifications for the next class and notifications for any other educational materials that we want to issue out. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like there's any other questions. Hopefully I covered the immediate need for a general overview of the Commission on State Mandates process. Please feel free to call the office or send me an email. I'm happy to have the conversation and to even we can rediscuss any of the parts of this presentation that maybe you missed or that maybe went by a little bit quickly, and we can go over it. Ideally, that's a great question. When will the recording be available? We are working on that. This is our first time doing that. So hopefully we'll have it posted on the Commission's website. Ideally, that will be on the education page near this particular class. So ideally, we'll be adding another link either here on this page, or it would be another link on the actual navigating the mandates process page. But we are working on that. But thank you for that question also. Thank you. And for anybody on the presentation who's ever called me, you've heard me say quite a lot of the same things that I usually talk with folks over on the phone. So I'm looking forward to having more presentations and answering more questions. You're welcome. Thank you. And we do have a few more minutes, so I can wait around in case anybody still has any questions or comes up with a question. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your attendance. Thank you. And just raise your hand if you need to be unmuted. Okay, Husham, I think most people have left. I think we can conclude the presentation. Thank you.